So I wasn't sure how to name this workshop. I know it was about ancestral medicine, but I really wanted to have a boom title. So no system but the ecosystem. I got a patch a couple of last year. And that's what it said. And I loved it because I think it's like super important for us, especially during this time of quarantine, to start thinking about, like how do we create like worlds that make sense, and just thinking about the idea of no system but the ecosystem. I think it just brings me hope. So a little bit about myself. My name is Loba, and I currently live in Los Angeles, Tombaland. And I am a facilitator, gardener, seed saver, reproductive justice organizer, between other things. You can find more of my work at lolobaloca.com. I also do bookings with universities, organizations, nonprofits, community groups, and consultations. And I also have a Patreon, so if you're interested on accessing more content, like queer, feminist, plant content, you can access it there. And also you can follow me at Instagram at Loba Loca shares. I also have a podcast. It's all free content. And if you enjoy this workshop, definitely check it out. It's called Wild Weeds Podcast. And we basically talk about everything from relationships between ourselves, others, and also greater than human creatures. So we really like to kind of play around with the idea of ecosystem as a whole, not just as, people, kind of like decentering humanity from from our conversations, since we center humanity a lot during conversations. So we like to kind of like talk about relationships between greater than human creatures too. So you can check me out on all of those. So today's conversation, today's workshop, it's going to be about healing land and also healing ourselves. So I really like to say that it's hard for us to think about healing and think about what a healthy future could look like if we're not also considering the health of our planet, the health of our land, the health of the people whose land we stand on, like the actual indigenous people of that land, the health of the folks that are mostly impacted, right? So we're thinking of Black indigenous folks, working class people, migrant folks, folks in prisons, folks in detention centers. So if we're really thinking about health, it's important for us to take into account land, water, mountains, but also people whose health has always been deemed as disposable, right? So I did wanted to start, just mention that as we start this workshop, because it is definitely interconnected, right? So if I want to be healthy, I need to be able to drink healthy water, right? So even just like what we have access to right now, where we live, like the way that environmental racism like impacts or maybe doesn't impact the area that we live in, like it really shows the importance of thinking in relationship, right? So thinking through a relationship lens in which if something happens to the land, then that is also going to affect us directly. So if the land is polluted, we're not going to be able to be healthy, right? So I think it's also important for us to start thinking about relationships in that way, right? So if there are prisons, if there are detention centers, if there is like anti-Blackness in our communities, if there is erasure of indigenous folks in their land, like if all of that exists, like how can we even think about a healthy future? So whenever I talk about healing and plants and medicine, I always like to also mention that, right? So I think it's also very political when we're talking about healing and plants and ancestral medicine. To me, at least, is a very political topic. And this is a picture of my garden, my current garden. I live in East Hollywood. It's the Los Angeles Basin. And this is a picture of my garden a year after I moved in. So I moved in May of 2019, and I'm going to kind of show you how it was before we started working with the garden and how it is now, and some of the really beautiful medicine and foods we've been able to grow there. And the reason why I like to talk about my gardens, and I always talk about my gardens, is because there is this concept. I'm from southern coastal Peru, specifically from Arequipa, and we call chakra, kind of very similar to what a milpa is. So it's an area, it's a physical area, it's a physical piece of land, piece of territory that we create connection to, where we grow our food. So it's not just like, like modern agriculture, where we think about land as something that we can just constantly consume and grow and, hope for the best yield and like hope for the best profit margins. But it's a chakra, so it's a place that we build a deep connection to, right? So there's a lot of work that happens between the land, between the actual ecosystem of that area and ourselves. And I think that's super important for us to also start understanding, even if we have access to a tiny little piece of land or a tiny little, I don't know, window that maybe we can grow some mint in, just the connection that we start creating with plants. I think it's super important, especially for these times, especially to kind of get ourselves as far away from extractivist mentality as possible, especially thinking about, you know, COVID-19 and the current health crisis, and just seeing how disproportionate it affects like specific groups of people. I'm thinking about, you know, so-called US, how Black folks, how Indigenous folks are disproportionately affected, right? Folks are living in prisons, you know, folks that are in detention centers, etc., right? So like the idea of really thinking about taking care of land, taking care of even just creating a tiny little space in our home to grow something, I think is super important, to even just begin to understand the importance of like caring for something besides our own, you know, blood family or our own kin, right? So really kind of like thinking about relationships in another way. So the concept of chakra also talks about a place of earth, of land that you give things to. So you're not only expecting medicine and plants and food from that piece of land, but you're also offering, right? So we have this thing called the pagos a la tierra, which are kind of payments to the earth. It's very, very similar to like libations, right? So like I've seen a lot of, you know, a lot of folks, you know, from like Black diaspora, Caribbean people, that do a lot of kind of like, you know, just pouring some water down into the earth. So it's very kind of like for the ancestors, right? For folks to kind of just like name those folks that are still with them. So it's very similar to that, you know, to just kind of like give something back to the earth or to our ancestors. And it's, I haven't lived everywhere in the world, but in my specific area of the world, it's called Pagos a la Tierra. And you can see it on the right. So you basically prepare a little food, like a little food basket. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but just to keep it simple. And you burn that and you give it back to the earth. So I've seen it a lot, and you know, just people around the world have their own ways of thanking earth and thanking land, and really thinking about reciprocity, and really thinking about like, okay, well, what can I give earth so I can, you know, be able to ask back, right? So the idea of feeding the earth, it's part of this concept of chakra. Although if you ask most people, they probably will tell you it just means a piece of land that you grow things at, but it's really more than that. It is like a spiritual connection that you build with that land. And the reason why I think it's so important to talk about the relationships that we build with land is because I think that one of the reasons why we have gotten to the point that we are right now, in which we don't care about the rivers, we don't care about the mountains, we don't care about, you know, people that are most impacted by all of this, is because we have forgotten to like fall in love with greater than human creatures, right? So we have forgotten to fall in love with land, to fall in love with seas, to fall in love with our traditional foods. A lot of this kind of this connection that really comes off just capitalist thinking and just living in a super westernized world. I think it's important for us to start, you know, working with plants and working with medicine and working with land and with earth, and like even attempting to heal it, right? So working with whatever little piece of land you have to really kind of feed medicine and put some seeds down and hope for food and for medicine to grow. So definitely wanted to also share that with you all, to encourage you to grow something, especially during this time. So I think that growing something is super important. And if you're interested in learning how to grow stuff, I have a workshop called DIY Gardens for the Apocalypse. So it's basically 2.5 hours of just like how to build soil, how to use DIY, you know, materials to build a garden, etc., etc., etc. So if you're interested, it's in my online store, laloaloca.bakerchill.com. And yeah, and then also about healing, right? So one of the issues that also comes up with healing is co-option and cultural appropriation. So And the right, I have this image of a white lady who she blocked me on Instagram because I did a whole call out in Instagram. But she basically had a lot of pictures of herself with indigenous children from the Andean region. And she was just like out there doing pagos a la tierra and just, charging thousands of dollars to do Andean rituals. And I got very upset. And I got very upset because the way that our medicine is co-opted and just used in such horrible ways, it really hurts us, right? So I'm actually going to talk about white sage in a little bit because I think it's such a hot topic, especially during these times, and the ways that extractivist spirituality like deeply affect people and the environment, right? Because it's not just about like a specific group of people getting upset that somebody's using their traditional medicine and their sacred medicine, but it's also the way that this like fab healing medicine, it usually ends up being extracted in ways that don't really like think about the future of that plant. So I'm thinking about sage, for instance. I'm thinking about ayahuasca, which is another plant that in order to have to make ayahuasca, you're using very old roots. So when people are out there trying to do ayahuasca every single day of their lives, or like traveling to the Amazon to do ayahuasca, one of the issues that it's coming up is that there's no more ayahuasca trees. Like it's all growth, right? These trees take forever. So in order to meet the global demand for this, medicines that become a fad, it requires that we extract medicine from earth in ways that is just not sustainable. And that's also happening with white sage here in Southern California. There is a lot of issues around people just going out there and harvesting white sage to the point that indigenous people to this area can't even access white sage, right? So it's happening with like, Whole Foods selling $10 a tiny little piece of white sage, or just like thinking that this one plant is going to heal everything, right? Which I think it's part of extractivist spirituality, just thinking that this one plant is going to heal all your problems. So I made this meme on the right that says, stop using other cultures to fill up your empty white settler soul. But I think it also applies to people of color too, in the ways that, especially those of us that maybe didn't necessarily grew up with a lot of our traditions, how sometimes we feel emptiness and we might do things that really put plants and medicine in danger, and that also, affect people in real ways. So just also wanted to talk about healing from that perspective of like understanding that co-option is a major issue in the healing community. And just to kind of like get people just thinking about that. And if you want to comment and give any other examples of co-option, medicine co-option, cultural appropriation, feel free to do that. I would love to hear what other people are thinking. And then on the left, I have a quote by Study Organizer. They're an amazing Instagram like political education platform, and it says, this isn't charity. We'll say it again, the future is endless networks of support and solidarity. And I also wanted to share that because during this times, we're talking COVID-19, there's been a lot of co-option around mutual aid, around community help, community organizing, community aid, even just the concept of communities being like watered down, and the idea of mutual aid too. So there's a lot of corporations, including the government, including Instagram, that are using, or even just, like I think I saw Grubhub and Postmates, like some of their advertisement in which they used, support your community, or this is mutual aid, or like nonprofits jumping in and just using the term mutual aid, but really mutual aid is an ancient form of survival that a lot of folks that have been affected by the system for centuries, for hundreds of years, have used to keep alive, right? So the idea of, mutual aid, and I can talk more about that if people are a little bit confused about, mutual aid. Let me know and I can talk more about that. But the idea of mutual aid, of like creating this autonomous networks of support that are very similar to like the way that mycelium works, for instance, or the way that plants work, right? So plants are constantly communicating with each other. There's like specific research that has been done about how plant roots talk to other plant roots and like share their resources, right? So the idea of mutual aid, the idea of really helping each other out, and not through charity, not kind of just like, here's like $1,200 so you can survive the apocalypse. No, not like a handout, through the government, but actual people just getting together and being like, you know what, I actually have $100 this month. Let me donate that to a autonomous collective doing beautiful work to distribute masks in their communities, right? So that idea of kind of just like not even asking the government for anything, because we know that the government doesn't have the lives of, like indigenous, Black, undocumented folks, disabled folks. Like it's not what they necessarily care for, right? So just thinking more about community organizing and for folks to start building those networks of support. So I think that even the idea of mutual aid has been co-opted too. So I also wanted to share that, right? And really share this quote that I love: the future is endless networks of support and solidarity. And just kind of thinking about the difference between charity and mutual aid, and how, especially during these times, it's important for us to kind of like step up and like be part of, like creating those mutual aid networks. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, and care networks are ancient. And also I wanted to mention that a lot of us have survived many apocalypses, right? So a lot of us have come from very resilient, backgrounds, right? Folks that have had to survive for hundreds of years, folks that have been attacked by the system through hundreds of years. So I also wanted to mention that when talking about healing, healing doesn't look the same for everybody, right? But it doesn't also look the same depending on like who you are and what type of access you have to heal, right? So I feel like sometimes I see the term healing or like ancestral medicine being thrown around so easily, but not everybody has even access to hot water to be able to make an herbal infusion. Like not everybody has access to, have a herbal bath. Like it's very real, and it's very sad how the access that we have, like whether we have housing or not, whether we have money to, have potable water, or drinking water, it really kind of affects how we can even think about healing. So just wanted to also mention that, because I think sometimes that happens a lot in the healing community, especially here in the West, is that people sometimes forget that not everybody has access to a kitchen to even make herbal infusions, right? But care networks are ancient. A lot of us have survived because of those care networks. And I think especially during this time, it's important for us to kind of keep pushing and keep organizing. So before I get into medicine, I have some medicine that I wanted to share with you all. Some very easy herbal support that we can be doing during this time. Before we get to that, I wanted to share with you some of my garden stories. And the reason why I like to share my garden stories is to also get people inspired, so that folks can grow their food, grow their medicine, and also so people can really like understand the idea of healing, right? So for me, even just being able to grow corn in my garden, to get the soil to be able to hold life, that was healing. Just to be like, wow, I can do that. Like, and I can really work with land in a way that a compacted LA soil that nothing has grown in there for like however long, I don't even know when the last time somebody tried to grow something in my yard was, because the soil was so compacted, but I was able to grow corn like weeks after starting a garden. Like that's amazing, right? Like the ability that we have to actually make a positive impact in the land that we care for, right? In the land that's around us. So I think that's also super important during this time, and super important when we're thinking about healing. There's no way we can think about healing if we're not thinking about also like what we can give back to you know, to the area that we're in, to the land that we have available around us. So on the left, on the very left, is a picture of my first garden. In the middle, my second garden, and then the third, my last garden. So you can kind of see the difference, right? So the first one, I was living there for about 4 or 5 years. In the middle one, I lived there for about 4 years. And on the very right, I lived there for 1 year. So I'll show you kind of like a little bit of how everything went. So I love talking about resourceful garden making, right? And if you're interested, I do have the recording of how to make DIY gardens for the apocalypse, and I talk more about this in detail. But this is, we moved in, me and my ex-partner moved in into it was like their parents' house in Echo Park, and it was like the garage, and you know, we have no bathroom, no kitchen. I had no money. Absolutely no money. So I was like, wait, how do I start a garden with no money? Like I don't even think I had a cell phone. Did I even have a cell phone? It was just, you know, it was just really rough times. But we moved in there, and as you can see in the back, you know, behind these people, we just started by putting down cardboard. The only piece of dirt that was available to us was this just weird sand looking thing that clearly all the kitties in the neighborhood were using as like a, you know, like a cat box, like a sandbox. And that was kind of like the beginning. We just put down some cardboard, and then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try to grow some stuff. So I went ahead and just kind of like tried to figure out what I could access in my neighborhood. I didn't have a car, so I couldn't just, you know, drive around and see where I, you know, if I could find wood pallets or anything. So there was a tire shop super close to us. And I went down there and I asked them like, hey, can I have some tires? Can you give me some old tires that you're not gonna use? And they were like, yeah, sure, take as many as you want. So all the tires that you see in this pictures were the beginning of that garden, right? So we're just working with whatever we could find. Some chiles from our neighbors that gifted us some seeds. And then, you know, I was like, okay, well, let me try to grow some watermelon. So I grew some watermelon. It just only one of them came up, but I was so happy because it was tasty. And I grew it in old tires. And you can see some of my seedlings and attempts to keep some plants alive. It was very hard because I didn't have any experience. I mean, I saw my family growing, you know, food here and there, but not enough for me to start a whole garden. And then you can see a couple of years passed, things started flourishing. Look at that. And then more years passed, and we literally had a little jungle. Like this, it was just so hot. Like that specific area when we moved in, it was so hot, it was so nasty, it wasn't cute at all. And in the picture, you see some of the plants that we're able to grow in there. A lot of medicine, lots of food, basil, white sage, lettuce, arugula, beans, native sunflowers, cempasúchil, kale. I see so much in there that I can name, amaranth, right? So you can totally make gardens. You can totally like create your little healing space. But yeah, and that's just, I think that was probably by year 4 that's, you know, what we ended up getting, and a lot of trial and error, but it's totally possible. And this is a picture of my last garden. So this is about like a year ago. On the very right, what we're doing is a process that we're kind of turning the soil, aerating it, kind of like in just getting more air into the soil. So when we moved in here, the soil was so compacted. The soil in the front, in the little front yard, it was just like, it took us to make that hole probably like 5 hours, and we were probably 5 people. It was so compacted. It was so compacted. Like we couldn't even find one tiny worm in there. It was that compacted. But we added amendment, and I kind of made this into a community workshop learning opportunity. So a lot of folks came out, and we were able to turn the soil, and like, you know, people were just kind of like coming through and like learning. about how to start their own gardens and kind of helping me out, but also learning, right? So I think that was really beautiful to start a garden like that. And then on the left, that's probably a couple of weeks in, and that's my friend setting up irrigation system in my garden. So you can kind of see it coming together. And I literally stopped working for like a month, and I was just like in my garden the entire time. And then, you know, a couple of months after, this is what you get. Things grew super fast, you know, it just needed a little bit of care. I grew this chapalote corn on the left. Those are really tall chapalote corn. And probably I moved in, and 6-7 months after I moved in, I already had corn that was, you know, already giving me corn. Beautiful, beautiful corn. Chapalote corn is thought to be the first type of corn that was not the first type of corn ever. I don't know how to say it. The first, you know, there is like the ancestor of the corn, the teocintle, but this is kind of like the first corn, I guess, like what we consider today as a corn. This is the first one, the chapalote one, the one on the left. Beautiful colors. If you ever have the chance to grow it, it's beautiful. The more pictures of the corn, you can kind of see the corn ear in the actual stalk. And this is some other corn that I grew in my second garden that I didn't add any pictures of that, but there's some corn that I grew. Beautiful corn. You can see my puppies eating it. They love eating corn. And I made really delicious tamales with this corn. Yeah, so that's just kind of like, you know, very fast little photo essay of my gardens. And I definitely think it's super important for folks to grow their own stuff, grow their own medicine, and learn how to heal the land, right? How to like work with land and how to make it fertile again. Again, especially during these times. And likely a lot of folks, I think, are kind of like coming into, you know, are just kind of like understanding the importance of doing this. Are there any questions right now? I can't really see. I want to see if there's any questions, or if you have any questions so far about what we've talked about. How do I see this? Okay. I can't find. Okay, perfect. Do y'all have any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask if anything is coming up for you. I'll give you a couple more seconds if you have any questions. Okay, perfect. So building resiliency and care practices. So something that I wanted to share with all of you was a little bit about just healing plants, healing herbs that we can be working with during this time. And first thing I'm going to start is with my corn. So this is my corn that I grew. This is also the chapalote corn that I showed in the pictures. It comes in different shades, like each of them has different colors, but as you can see, they all look toasted. Let me show you the other one. So chapalote corn looks toasted, like the sun kissed it. As you can see, they're beautiful. So first things first, especially when we're talking about healing, right? I think it's important for us to delve into kitchen magic. Some people call themselves kitchen witches. So specifically people that work with medicine while they cook. So I think that sometimes people forget that a lot of the spices that we use to make our food tasty are actually really, they're not just used just to make it tasty, but they actually have a reason why we use them. So for instance, black pepper is an amazing spice to add to your food because it really kind of like, it helps your body absorb the nutrients like more than it would if it didn't have black pepper, right? So black pepper, for example, is something that I always tell people, add black pepper to your food. I'm always just adding a bunch of black pepper into my food. It's also really good for digestion. It's warming. Thyme, rosemary, oregano, those are antiviral, antibacterial plants that we cook with. Not only because they make things tasty, but also because they help us, they help us digest our foods better, but they're also antimicrobial and antiviral, right? So it's just very smart to start thinking about food as our medicine too. Taking medicine or working with medicine doesn't always mean, to just have a cup of tea or to have tinctures, but sometimes it means cooking with it. And this are little ears of corn. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I think that ancestral foods are also very important when we're talking about building resiliency, building care practices, and even just building just the idea that we all come from somewhere, right? We don't come out of nowhere. Like they're actual histories that we carry with us. So sometimes what I see happening, especially when it comes with cultural appropriation or people just taking other people's practices, is that people haven't taken the time to learn about their own traditional foods, their own traditional medicine. So sometimes people are just out there wilding out, just using all types of weird things, just being wild, because they really don't know who they are, right? And I'm not saying that to excuse them, because it's not okay in any way, shape, or form, but I'm just saying that sometimes the idea of even going out there and like doing the research necessary for us to learn about our own traditional practices is something that people don't do. So this one right here, this is corn, and corn for me is one of those kind of first foods, traditional foods. Chapalote corn doesn't come from Peru. I'm from Peru. This one comes from what is now considered Mexico, but corn itself is healing food for my people. So there is a lot of foods that we cook with corn. We grow a lot of corn in Arequipa, but also we have a chicha, which is a fermented drink that is made out of fermented corn. So I always want to encourage folks to learn about the foods that are from your people, right? And like honestly, it's so important to do that, just to do the research, but also to just start understanding that a lot of the foods that our ancestry has eaten for hundreds, if not thousands of years, like that is what we need to kind of like start eating again. Like our bodies remember the foods that we have eaten for thousands of years. Like our bodies remember that, we like corn. There's people that call themselves people of the corn, right? There's people whose origin stories are basically being corn, right? So just really thinking about the importance of working with traditional medicines, traditional foods, whatever that looks like for you. Definitely want to encourage you to do that. And I think that also being more mindful of your traditional foods really kind of like allows for us to understand that, it's not okay to just be co-opting and stealing other people's medicines. The next one that I want to show you all, it's another medicine from my area of the world. Let me see if I can show you a little. So this is the Coca Leaf. This is the coca plant. I always like to show it because sometimes people are like, oh my God, it's a coca plant. And unfortunately, the way that coca has been, I guess, the reason why a lot of people know what coca even is because people think that it's cocaine, which is not. And that's another example of how a traditional medicine is co-opted and, just disrupted and just taken out of context completely. The coca leaf is green. I always like to show that to people. It's green and coke is not. So coke is completely different than the coca. The coca plant, we use it medicinally. So let's say when somebody's giving birth, that person is drinking a cup of coca tea. Coca tea is very warming. It's very energizing. So when you are giving birth, you want to make sure that you're warm. and also that you have the energy to be able to go through birth. So my grandma, for instance, whenever she went into labor, she would have coca tea. And then, you know, the baby's born. If the baby starts having tummy aches, or it starts getting a little bit sick, they give the baby coca tea because it's really good for your immune system. It's really good for tummy support. It really kind of helps pass the gas. It really helps you kind of digest food better. A lot of times when you go to the Andean region, you're probably going to have food, and then after your food, you're going to have coca and muña tea, or coca tea or muña tea. Both of them are really good for your digestive system. For people living in high altitudes, this is coca is really, really important because it basically helps folks breathe better, right? So it's just an extremely energizing, magical plant, very sacred. Is used a lot also for pagos a la tierra, right? So when you're giving back to earth, or like, you know, just beginning to kind of build a connection to earth, you're giving the coca leaf. Coca leaf is also used for lots of rituals. My uncle he reads the coca leaf because you can also read the coca leaf. It's kind of one of those just plants that are so deeply connected with Andean culture, that this is said to be the plant that it's the way that Mother Earth talks to us. So the coca leaf is the way that Mother Earth talks to us. So people, you know, throw their coca leaves and then they see how they fall, and then they kind of can tell you your fortune. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful plant. And, you know, even when somebody is dying, right? So when somebody dies, the process of death, before the person is buried, the coca leaf is part of that process too, because it's said to be kind of like the way that our dead talk to us, right? So it's a very important kind of like in-between world plant. A lot of mummies have been found with coca inside their mouth. So when people die, or when people die, people would put a bunch of like coca leaf in their mouth because it's a way that they can continue to talk to us. So this is a great example of, you know, going back to our traditional medicines and really kind of working with medicines that our ancestors have been working for thousands of years, right? And like the importance of and like our bodies remember that, right? So our bodies really do remember like what medicines like we carry and what medicines our bodies are used to getting. This is beautiful medicine. I have powder coca, and I put that in my smoothie. I think that's like super important, especially for, you know, this times of coronavirus, to like be using everything that we have, all our ancestral medicines. And if you don't know what your ancestral medicines are, do the research, right? So it's important for us to do that research and like go out there and invest time in doing that research. Especially now with the internet, it's so much easier. I mean, I'm not saying that believe everything the internet says, no, but I'm just saying, like, you know, get some ethnobotany books, ask your family, ask your aunts, ask your grandparents, you know, just do the work. It's a lot of work, but it's necessary. Another medicine that I wanted to share with you is eucalyptus. Eucalyptus is amazing. I love eucalyptus. It's a beautiful plant. If you've ever into natural dyes, eucalyptus, probably one of my favorite natural dyes shades has been from eucalyptus. It's this beautiful brown shade. Like, it's just like so beautiful. And you can go out into the mountains, into your, you know, the parks around your neighborhood, or the national parks even. If you find eucalyptus, harvest it all. Eucalyptus is beautiful medicine, but it's an extremely opportunistic plant. So another term for opportunistic plant is, oh my God, I forget what I've been trying to not use that term and just use opportunistic, and now I have forgotten the actual term. Invasive. It's an invasive plant. So invasive plants are plants that are not from a specific area, but that have been brought to that area. And because because usually the weather or the climate is very similar to their like indigenous habitat, they start growing wild. They're just going wild and just growing everywhere and taking up space that native flora can grow in, right? So this one is from Australia. Eucalyptus is not native to so-called America, so-called US, so-called South America. It's not native to this continent, but it grows everywhere. And the reason why you want to go out and harvest a bunch of eucalyptus is because it's extremely medicinal, but also because once you take the eucalyptus out and when you like use it and just like rip it out from the root, then you're going to create more space for native plants to grow. So I'm super anti-wildcrafting, and I'm going to talk a little bit about wildcrafting, because I also think that one of the issues that we've been seeing is people just going out into the wild and like wildcrafting all of the white sage and wildcrafting all of the elderberry, right? So a lot of folks is being like very much into like their own personal healing, or you know, the health of their pockets, you know, and just selling all of this medicine without really recognizing like the impact that they are, you know, like the negative impact they're having on the environment, but also on people whose land we're on, who depend on those medicines to heal themselves, like their traditional medicines, right? So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I wanted to share with you all some stuff to do with eucalyptus. This is a really good one to do face steams with. You can take baths with eucalyptus, really nice for the sinus, right? Even if you're not feeling sick, even before you feel sick, work with the medicine that you have available. Get eucalyptus, put it in a pot, make it boil, throw some eucalyptus in there, and then put a towel over your head and just breathe that in. If you don't want to do that, you can let this boil and just kind of have your entire home get some of its healing properties. Eucalyptus is really good, especially during these times. And also you're using medicine that is just growing so abundantly that is taking over native habitat, right? So when we're wildcrafting, the things that we can wildcraft and that we can feel good about wildcrafting are plants that are opportunistic or plants that just took over that are not indigenous to that area. So for instance, wild mustard here in California, it grows so wild, and we can make actual mustard with wild mustard, right? We can get the leaves and we can cook them up. But one of the issues with wild mustard, because it's not a plant that is native to here, is that it takes over native habitat. So it doesn't allow for native plants to grow. And one of the issues with that is, one, we need native plants to grow because this is their actual habitat. Two, people, indigenous people to this area, are not able to go and harvest their foods because they're not growing, because, you know, this opportunistic species are going. But three, there's native pollinators. There's actual animals that need specific foods, right? So if we don't have the native plant growing, then we don't have the insects and the animals, right? So it really is about thinking through relationship and thinking about how everything is affected by everything. And definitely go out there and harvest some of this. Harvest wild mustard, harvest castor bean, and make your own castor oil. You know, just go out and kind of like figure out what are the plants that are kind of like taking over native habitat, and use that, make that medicine, make that food, sell it. I mean, honestly, like if somebody was out there making medicine with wild mustard, I'll be like, here's my money, because one, that's extremely amazing for the environment, right? So to get rid of as much wild mustard as we can so that native plants can grow, but also like that's wild food. That's like great that people are, you know, like making money and like also clearing space for native habitat to grow. The next one is rosemary. So rosemary is probably one of my favorite plants right now. I mean, I have a lot of favorite plants, probably all of them are my favorite plants, but rosemary is a beautiful aromatic plant. You can take it internally, you can make teas with it, you can take a bath with it, you can burn. Burning rosemary is something that I've been pushing for a lot, because there is a lot of people out there burning white sage. I'm going to talk about white sage in a little bit, but the reason why we want to burn rosemary is because it's an antiviral, antibacterial, cleansing plant, very protective plant, grows abundantly. You can get so much rosemary. Like, go out into your neighborhood and find rosemary, harvest it, dry it, take baths with it. Food baths is very warming. You can cook with it. Oh my God, beautiful, beautiful medicine, rosemary. Don't underestimate it. This is dry rosemary. I wish I had a lighter just to show you how it just burns so beautifully. It's just like it burns beautifully, and then you can inhale the smoke, and that's a lot of medicine. This is a plant native to North Africa, the Mediterranean region. Definitely grows in California abundantly. So I really want to encourage you to go ahead and use this instead of other plants, you know, instead of Palo Santo, instead of white sage. I mean, if you already have Palo Santo, you already have white sage, I guess, you know, you can use that, but next time, don't even buy anything else. Just go and harvest some rosemary, or buy some rosemary from the store and dry it, right? So rosemary is beautiful. Cook with it. It's very warming. This is really good, especially during the flu and cold season. People make a lot of rosemary medicine with it. There's a preparation called fire cider. If you're interested on learning about fire cider, I'm gonna have a video coming up in my IGTV. So if you follow me on Instagram, Loba Loca shares, then you'll get to see it, and just basically how to make fire cider. Very easy medicine, beautiful medicine that really helps you digest your digestive system and also your immune system, right? So, and we use rosemary, which is a really important part of making fire cider. So if you're interested in doing that, just make sure to follow me, and you'll find it in my IGTV. So now we're gonna move on to white sage. Anybody has any questions? If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I don't think I see anything on the chat box. Okay. So this is white sage. I have white sage growing in my garden. My yard is very little, but I've been able to pack it in, just have everything I can possibly think of in there. This is a white sage leaf. Smells beautifully. I burn one of this leaves lasts me for a couple of days. I don't really burn a whole lot. White sage is a sacred medicine to the indigenous people of this area. So I live on Tombaland, Tomba people, Chumash people, Kumeyaay people, you know, these folks that are from areas in which this plant has grown traditionally for thousands of years. They have a very deep connection to white sage. One of the issues with extractivist healing is that what ends up happening is that there's this boom plant, right? This one plant that everybody goes after. Sometimes it happens with food. It happened with quinoa, for instance. Like a couple of years ago, people were like, oh my God, just going wild for quinoa, right? And that's kind of cool because, you know, you can think about it and you can be like, okay, well, they're supporting the farmers in the Andean region, but no. the issues that globalization and the global market create are evil. They're evil. So for instance, in the case of quinoa, right, it became this food that everybody wanted to access to. Everybody, I mean Westerners. It was such a huge demand that the indigenous people growing quinoa would rather sell the quinoa than eat it themselves, right? So because it was such high prices, a lot of folks would be like, I'm not going to eat this traditional food that is quinoa. I'm going to go and get something from McDonald's, right? That maybe was like money wise, it would make sense for them to like eat McDonald's instead of, you know, like eating their own quinoa, because they could sell the quinoa for way more money, right? So that's just an extremely wild example of the issues that come up when we're thinking about the global market and we're thinking about this boom foods that everybody wants to go after, right? Same thing with white sage. White sage has become one of those plants that everybody's like trying to go after. People are harvesting it. People are going out there and just like taking. They don't know how to harvest. They harvest the whole thing and they forget that. And they forget that people, like indigenous people, have actual relationships with this plant. And this is basically like what some folks would consider their church. Like that's what white sage is for them, right? So it's like extremely sacred medicine that, especially thinking about, you know, like California native folks, a lot of the tribes are not even recognized by the federal government. So a lot of folks don't even have a home, can't even live here because it's so expensive to live in LA, right? So, or live in Malibu, right? So prime real estate that a lot of folks don't have access to even living in their own traditional lands, right? Because it's become Hollywood and it's become this like super gentrified land. And, you know, just imagine that, not even being able to like live in your traditional territories and you can't even access white sage because people are out there harvesting it. Companies are going out there and harvesting it. Like, how horrible must that feel, right? So I don't wild harvest white sage. I grow white sage. You can work with white sage in so many ways. I make tea with white sage. Um, you can, you can work with it in so many different ways, but definitely don't wild harvest it. It's extremely beautiful medicine. It smells delicious. Burning it, it feels really nice, right? But at the same time, like, understanding that this plant has a very deep connection to the indigenous people of this land, and like me burning it, it's not going to be the same as Native Californian people, like communing with it in the same way, because the connections and the relationships that we have created with our ancestral plants are very different, right? So it's like me with the Coca Leaf, like my entire, probably since the beginning of times, right? My family has been using the Coca Leaf. Like, it's a really deep connection. This is the first time, I'm the first person in my family that has lived in this territory, right? So it's me just getting to know this plant, right? So people that are indigenous to this territory is not being able to access like their sacred medicine is extremely heartbreaking. So I always tell people, don't buy this at the store. Don't buy it, like sometimes I see people selling it online, even like people of color, like non-native people of color selling it. And I'm just like, this is so wrong. Like, we can't be doing that. We can't be thinking about healing if we're not also thinking about how we're negatively impacting people whose like traditional medicine this is, but also the land. And also, like, you go out there and you see white sages that have been so damaged, like over harvested, to the point that those plants are not going to seed. They're not going to like keep giving out babies, like those plants are not going to come back. So this is an endangered plant. It's on the watch list. Definitely do not go out there and harvest native plants. You can go out there and plant native plants. You can go out there and harvest and wildcraft, like wild mustard and milky oats and just, all of these plants that have taken over a native habitat, but do not do that with native plants. And I always like to share that, because especially with white sage, when we're buying white sage from Whole Foods, from, wherever it is, somebody in the internet, we're directly impacting like how much white sage like indigenous folks have access to. So if you really love white sage, just grow it. It's not that hard to grow, so you can totally grow it. And you can work with it, and you can burn it if you want to, but you're growing it, so you also understand how much work it takes to get a plant going, right? So if a cultivated plant, if it takes like a whole year for it to become luscious, imagine a plant in in the mountains, like how much harder it is for that plant to be able to get to that size, right? So you really, when you start growing plants, you start understanding how hard it is for plants to actually like survive this capitalist system. Like, you're just like, wow, like you're really amazing to even just be here. I'm not going to go and wildcraft you because you're just doing such a good job. Like, I'm just going to like look at you, smell you, maybe take some of the leaves that are on the floor, like give you a little bit of water just to thank you for just being so amazing. But I want to just get away from you, not take you, and grow my own, right? So I think it's important for us to grow plants, because we also start learning that it's so much work for plants to like actually even just like be with us right now, especially white sage. So the next one is this beautiful ginger that I wanted to share with you. Very hitting medicine. Is very warm. Again, this is another key component of the fire cider medicine that I'm going to be making a video on how to do fire cider in my IGTV, so you will be able to access it for free. And fire cider is beautiful medicine because it's very warming, right? So especially for this COVID-19 pandemic is important. Ginger is very heating. So for some folks that run a little hot, so there's different constitutions. There are folks that run a little colder, people that run a little hotter. I'm pretty much on the cold side, of the cold spectrum. So when I take ginger in the summer, even if it's hot out, it doesn't really affect me. But if people already run hot, they're taking ginger during the summer, they might be a little bit like, oh, this is a little bit too much hotness right now. But definitely want to encourage folks to add some ginger into their diets. Really good to kind of like boost our immune system and also our digestion. So you can use ginger in so many ways. Like you can cook with it, you can make teas with it. You can also make ginger beer. You can ferment it. You can ferment the ginger. Ginger has a lot of like, especially the skin. It has a lot of like active bacteria, and that's what it makes it a great fermenting product. So you can even YouTube ginger bug. Very easy. You're just using water, ginger, and sugar, and you can have like an entire batch of ginger beer. It doesn't really get super alcoholic unless you leave it there, but you know, you can make your own fermented food. Like fermented food is so important during these times. Cultured beverages, kombucha that you're making at home, curtido, cabbage lot, like the actual fermented food. Like it's so important for us to be drinking and eating fermented foods. Like I'm on kombucha and on kefir water and on like pineapple and ginger ferments like every day. I take like 4 or 5 glasses of different types of ferments because they're culture foods. So they're basically, first of all, probably like one of the first ways that humans, that earthlings kind of figure out how to store food. One of the first ways, besides drying it, was to ferment it. So with fermented food, you can make stuff last for a long time, right? And you can make beer with it, and you can make vinegar with it. You can make alcohol with it. You can make, and you know, in alcohol and beer, you're not just drinking it to get drunk, but you're also using that to make medicine, right? Because when you have alcohol, like an alcoholic base, you can extract medicine from specific plants and specific roots and specific foods, right? So it's very smart. Like humans, we have definitely, like our evolution process has also had a lot of ferments in it. So we need to start eating that, and we need to start making that at home, and it's not that hard. And I have more information on that in my page, and if you're interested, but you can also find it anywhere in the internet. And then lastly, before we finish this portion, since I have, you know, some of the things that I have listed there: plants, fungi, food, sovereignty, autonomy, networks, mutual aid, sharing resources, talking to your neighbors. These are mushrooms. So these are double extraction mushroom preparations. This is lion's mane, and this is reishi. So I wish I have so many mushrooms growing everywhere. I'm like, I wish I had them with me to show them to you, but basically mushrooms are amazing. That's been like my thing. I've been like super into mushrooms like this last couple of months. I've been like, this is what's gonna take us to the next level. Mushrooms, growing mushrooms at home, even just learning about mushrooms and being like, wow, like the mycelial network, like the way it's organized, it's so similar to like radical mutual aid groups. It's so similar to like radical movements for liberation. Like it's so similar. I'm just like, wow, this is like a lot of information and everything ties together. But yeah, so mushroom extracts are actually amazing. This is a great time for us to be going and, you know, drinking reishi tea, reishi decoction, reishi double extraction, turkey tail, lion's mane, oysters, like going out there and cooking with mushrooms, you know, like really getting good medicinal mushrooms and cooking with it, making medicine with it. This is the time to really like figure out our mycelial companions, right? Not only because the actual, like the way that they feel, the way that they grow, the way they myceliate, and the way that they just like grow, it's just like so mind-blowing and just so similar to what is necessary for us to do in order to survive this apocalypse. But also because they're super good to boost our immune system. Like a lot of the mushrooms, the medicinal mushrooms are like widely used. A lot of them are used for cancer treatment. Like my grandma got cancer. The first thing that I did was get her a bunch of mushrooms, like powder mushrooms, just to help her through it. Beautiful medicine. I'm taking reishi and lion's mane right now, and I'm making a whole bunch with turkey tail, has some chaga. You know, just make sure that you're getting your mushrooms from a place that is either harvesting their own mushroom, they are like they're growing their own stuff, because there's also a lot of extractivism when it comes to accessing mushroom medicine. There's a lot of folks going out there and just being wild and taking a bunch of medicine from from nature, right? Which is also not okay for us to do. So yeah. And then just to finish up, some cool books for y'all to read. Criándonos entre plantas y hombres on the left. That's a beautiful book on Andean traditional agricultural practices, specifically of the Cusco area. Beautiful book if you're interested in learning more about, how other folks grow their food. In the middle, DIY mushroom cultivation. I really loved this book. It's by Willie B. Arevalo. There's a lot of mushroom books out there, a lot. But I really enjoyed this one in particular because the author is Peruvian, and I love that he actually mentioned the lands that he lives in, like the traditional lands and the different tribes and groups of folks that are from that land. A lot of mushroom cultivation books don't do that. They never mention like what land they're on, what land they're harvesting their medicine from. So I think it's super important for us to start being very mindful of naming the places, the lands that we are on. And on the very right, Making Kin Not Population, beautiful book, super important. I think it goes a lot with this conversation around like ecosystem. Other books, just because I love books and I have so many books that are so cool. People Psychology, Explorations in Sustainable Living, Health, Environment, Agriculture, and Native Traditions by Gregory Cajete. This is a book. The guy is a Pueblo native. It's a beautiful book. Like this book, I mean, all of his books have made me cry. Whenever I read about plants and people, and people doing their own traditional agricultural methods and like their own medicines. I'm always like crying because I think it's beautiful. This is a book written by a white guy. It's called The Man Who Talks with the Flowers, The Intimate Life Story of Dr. George Washington Carver. It's written by Glenn Clark. He's a white guy. He wrote this in like 18 something or like the beginning of like 19 something, so there is, so it's a beautiful story. I haven't finished it yet. I think it's beautiful that, they're narrating how amazing Dr. George Washington Carver is. Honestly, if you don't know who Dr. George Washington Carver is and you're into plants and growing food, like we need to know about him. He's just, I've cried reading this book because he's just an amazing example of like Black agricultural knowledge and just like the ways that agriculture in so-called US and just, like there's a lot there to talk about. Like there's also that other great book, forget the name, by Leah Penniman, Farming While Black. It's also a really good book, really good resource, and just talking about the ways in which Black farmers have been systematically like their land has been taken away from them, because like if you know how to grow food, then you have power, right? So the ways that like anti-Blackness and the system has really like taken that away from Black people. But yeah, Dr. Washington Carver, I'm just like, wow, amazing, like amazing. But yeah, this book, it does like they use the N-word in it because I guess he wrote it in like the early 19 something. But so just I wanted to share that. I don't want you to go and think that it's a great book and then be like, oh, ew. Okay, and the next one is In the Shadow of Slavery, Africa's Botanical Legacy in the Atlantic World, Judith A. Carney. This is again white people writing it, but I really like this book. I haven't finished it yet. I read it here and there. I liked it because the way that the authors and I think they're editors, I think they're like people, there's different people writing each, no, they're both of them are the authors. I really loved it because it really, like, they're very much into saying like, this is African agricultural knowledge. Like they're super like into naming that throughout the whole book and just being like, we have these foods because of African people. Like this is actual African knowledge. Like we're really into like honor that, blah, blah, blah. So I really appreciate that. So if you're interested, get it. A lot of our foods that we eat in our daily lives are actual African foods, including coffee and the coffee leaf. So I think it's also important, right? So especially because, you know, like a lot of my research has been on like traditional foods to Arequipa, where I'm from. I think it's important for me to also like learn, right, the ways that like African agricultural knowledge has impacted the entire world, but also especially like areas such as Peru, where there was a ridiculous amount of like African people that were kidnapped from Africa and then taken to Peru, like, you know, the Caribbean. Like, oh, there's just so many of the foods that we eat we don't even know, and they're like, you know, from all of these places in the world. It's wild. This is a beautiful book, Ethnobotany Project, Contemporary Uses of Native Plants, Southern California and Northern Baja California Indians. Beautiful. Like, this book is, I mean, look at the, just so many beautiful photos. Native Californian folks just talking about their medicines and like, you know, like native plants. And I mean, I like it too, because they say like we're sharing this so people know, but we're just don't go out there and harvest, which I think is important. You know, just go and grow it if you really want to try it. And then Cooking the Native Way. This is also, are they the same way? No. This is by the Coffee Collective. The Chia Coffee Collective is a native Californian collective, and they focus on like traditional foods and all that. And this is a beautiful book. I love my native California books. And actually, this one was this is by Chia Coffee Collective, and this is written by native people. And I believe this one is too. I think those are like native folks writing their own stuff, which is super important. Native Californian folks. And yes, so lastly, to kind of close this up, I have a how to make your own reusable menstrual pads online class coming up. So if you're interested, check it out. It's happening May 31st on the internet, but the recording will be available even after. So you can always hit me up for more of that information. I also have on the left Sprouting Gardens, DIY plants and garden tending for the apocalypse. It's an online class, 2.5 hours of just talking about how to start your own garden. It's available in my online store, lalobaloca.bakerchill.com. And on the right, I have my next class coming up that is currently on sliding scale starting at $18, Intro to Herbalism for the Apocalypse. So if you're interested in learning more about plants, gardens, reusable menstrual pads, you can always hit me up. And this is my information. So you can always hit me up in Instagram, Loba Loca shares, my website, my Patreon, my podcast. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to me today.